Okay, great stuff. So very quickly then, so I'm Jo Stanford. I'm head of the Corporate Portfolio Office for Health Education England, but I'm also head of Project Profession for HE, and I work with my counterparts as heads of profession to develop the project profession for the NHS, and we've been leading a programme for the last it seems like forever, 4 years really, starting from the development of community of practice, and where we're at now is we've developed NHS Project Futures, we've got community of practice, we have core skills online learning modules for the basics in project management, we're developing a capability framework, Mike's doing all the work on that, and we're also then looking at developing education programs. So there's a level 4 project data analyst program, a level 4 associate project management program, level 6 BSc in project management, and that's the one we're talking about today. And then we're planning to commission a level 7 systems thinking master's degree. That one's still to be confirmed in terms of a provider on that, but we will follow up on that one for anybody who's interested in that as well. And just to say that we, whilst we're talking about the education programs, now we're also looking at having a festival in February, so Apprenticeship Week. So put that in your diaries. So the week of the 8th of February, it's going to be a week-long festival. We're going to have some fun. We're going to do a hackathon for anybody who's up for a challenge and wants to tackle some of the key things that we want to really test out and play with, and there's going to be awards and celebration at the end of it. So if I can introduce you then to, so Mike Gray is part of the team. He's developing the capability framework and is part of the NHS Projects Futures team. And then if we ask Charles Dobson, who is the principal lecturer in project management at University of Cumbria, to talk about the programme that they run. Thank you, Charles.
Thanks, Jo. Hopefully you can all see my slides and hear me nice and clearly. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you this lunchtime. And what I'll try and do is very quickly give you an overview of, firstly, apprenticeships, then particularly the degree apprenticeship for project management, and then finally what we at the University of Cumbria offer to sort of meet that need, if you like. So make a note of any questions as you're going along. There should be plenty of time at the end to answer them. I'll try and keep my talking to a minimum so that we've got more time for dealing with questions. So I'll launch straight into this. So I'm not sure how much people know about apprenticeships, so I'll very quickly go over them and then move to the PM1 more specifically. So they've been around for a long time in various different formats, and I guess the most recent innovations really have been to extend apprenticeships beyond the traditional further education levels into higher education levels. And most recently, in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, there's been a sequence of degree level and even master's level apprenticeships that are now available for people to study. They're funded in a couple of ways. The main one is any organisation that has a significant payroll budget has to pay a levy amount into a pot, which they can then draw down to help fund the apprenticeships. Smaller companies that don't have such a substantial pay budget are allowed to put apprentices through, and the government pay 90% of the fund, and the organisation themselves just have to pay 10%. So there's a range of organisations that are interested in apprenticeships. It's not just large organisations like yourself. The government are trying to incentivise any organisation to take on and train apprentices. So we'll talk specifically about the project manager level degree, and you can then get a sense of how that might fit with your own careers, your own experiences, and where you might want to take it. So it's typically a 4 or a 5 year programme. So it's quite extensive in length. It encompasses a degree fully as part of it, and normally a degree would be 3 years of education on its own, never mind doing the additional things that are required for an apprenticeship. So hence it being at least 4 years, sometimes 5 years. It just depends how employers want to structure that programme. And the whole idea is that apprenticeships are work-based. So the main difference between a standard apprenticeship and a degree apprenticeship is that a degree apprenticeship will include a degree. And if it's a degree, then we have to award that degree in a very similar way that we would do with any other normal degree standard. So therefore, there's quite a lot of education that's taking place, assessments, and a program would follow the sort of same natural route that a standard 3 or 4 year undergraduate degree program would take. Alongside that, apprentices are then doing work-based practice, where they are primarily building a portfolio of evidence that will demonstrate their achievement of defined competencies. And again, this is one of the big differences between apprenticeships and standard education. Education is really about knowledge, demonstrating understanding, whereas apprenticeships, the whole point of them is to demonstrate competence. So when you come out of the end, you not only have the knowledge of doing something, but you've demonstrated that you can actually apply it and you can do the job. So a degree apprenticeship has to cover all of the requirements of a degree and all of the requirements of a defined set of competencies. The project manager level 6 degree apprenticeship standard is something called an integrated degree, which means that the apprenticeship and the degree are inherently linked, and they come together in the final piece of assessment, which is providing it's passed, means that they can achieve both qualifications at effectively the same time. So by finishing your degree, you finish the apprenticeship, and by finishing the apprenticeship, you finish the degree. If for some reason there's been a problem, or you might fail that final assessment, then you can't leave with one and not the other. So you would maybe do a resit. You got one resit attempt, for example, to make up the program. So the two are inherently built together. The course follows a sequence of learning and portfolio development, which typically lasts around 3 years, which is sort of the training element of it, if you like. And that following that, you progress through something called a gateway assessment. I'll tell you a bit more about that later. When you get through the gateway assessment, you go through to something called endpoint assessment. And if anybody else has done a lower level apprenticeship, then they'll be familiar with those. And that's the final judgment, if you like, by a panel of experts, professionals, that you are competent in your chosen area of knowledge, in this case, project management. As well as doing your study and your portfolio building, you will be supported with what we are calling tripartite reviews. There are 2 or 3 of these a year, where you will sit down with your work-based supervisor, a member of the project management delivery team, and yourself as apprentices, and discuss your progress, set objectives, reflect on how far you've travelled since the last review, discuss any issues, challenges. Are there bits of evidence that you need to collect and your current role doesn't provide that opportunity? So what might we need to do about it? So those will sort of help you structure your progression through the apprenticeship to make sure that when you've finished that main training period, you've been able to demonstrate all of the competencies that you need to progress through that gateway. So this is taken straight from the assessment of the standard itself, and it just sort of gives a high level of how the program is structured. That green area in the middle, I've pulled it out as a separate slide, and I'll talk you through that separately, the gateway. The main part, if you like, as a starting point, is the course structure itself. So there's your on-program learning and assessment. The majority of the degree itself, which in our case is a BSc project management. It could equally be a BA project management, but we choose ours to be a BSc. Alongside your formal education, there'll be that formative assessment of your portfolio of evidence, which will be specific to you, the experiences you've had, and will demonstrate how you are meeting the competencies defined in the standard. I'll tell you a bit more about the competencies shortly. The other thing you've got to collect along the way is something that's equivalent to the International Project Management Association's Level D, and the course that we're choosing to map across to that standard is the APM PMQ. So it's an industry standard qualification from the Association for Project Management. Stands for Project Management Qualification. It's quite a challenging exam. It's a 3-hour exam, lots to write down, but it's very much a knowledge-based qualification. Typically, we will put people through that at the end of their first year of education. There'll be a second opportunity at the end of the second year of education, if need be. So that's, again, one of the core things that you'll need to be able to progress through the gateway. I'll talk through the gateway in a bit more detail shortly, but once we pass through this thing called the gateway, then we get through to the endpoint assessment period. You've then got a window of opportunity where you've got to undertake a specific project, ideally from concept through to delivery. So it can't be anything too big because you've only got a 5 or a 6 month window in which to do this. It might be some sort of improvement program within a department or a discipline area, or it might be a very focused and targeted actual implementation of something. But that will be discussed between ourselves, yourself, and the employer to make sure that there's an appropriately sized piece of work that coincides with that particular period in time. You go through that endpoint assessment, applying the skills and knowledge that you've gained in your apprenticeship, and at the end of which you would submit a report that explained what you've done and how you've applied those competencies. And that will be used alongside your portfolio that you've already completed. You'll have a professional review where there's a formal interview and you get some questions from an assessor. And at the end of all of that, we can make a decision about whether or not you pass the final stage, if you like, and are deemed competent as a project management professional. Once you get through that final stage, that endpoint assessment, you're then deemed to have not only got the degree, but you've also got the apprenticeship. You get automatic eligibility for membership of the Association for Project Management. You're then hopefully out in the wider world as a practicing PM and on your route to chartership, if that's where you would want to take it next, which might be then a subsequent 5 or 10 year journey. So the gateway is a decision which is, I guess it's a formal, informal decision, might be a good way of saying it. You can't start the endpoint assessment until you've gone through this gateway, which is the formality of it. The informal bit is, one element of it really is around the subjective nature of the evidence in your portfolio. Is your employer satisfied that you have collected enough evidence so that should we put you through to the endpoint assessment, you've got a good chance of demonstrating the competencies? The other two elements of the gateway are quite formal. The first one is that you've passed all of the modules on the actual degree side of things to this point. You've also achieved the PMQ qualification. So there's 2 boxes which have to be ticked, and the third one is really around a subjective evaluation of each apprentice on an individual basis. And we'll have been working towards that for a while, so that should progress without a real issue. So moving on to the apprenticeship standard itself, apprenticeship standards are broken down into 3 competency areas based around knowledge, skills, and behaviours. The knowledge components are usually very easy to demonstrate with evidence from your actual study, and you will be able to find evidence on the modules of the course to map against these particular competencies, but there would also be evidence within your own organisation of demonstrating your competence around the knowledge components. I won't read them all out. The standard itself is available on the internet. You can find it under the Office for Apprenticeships. And if you just do a search on Google or something similar for project manager degree apprenticeship, you'll come across the standard, and that will tell you a little bit more about these competencies. So underneath each one of these competencies, you will find 2 or 3 sentences that explain what that competency is about, a bit more detail. And that's typically where we would then expect the evidence to be generated around those more specific sentences, if you like. If we move down to the skills, there's quite a strong alignment between the skills areas and the knowledge areas. So the skills are demonstrating the application of the knowledge that you will acquire through the programme. And then there's a set of very different competencies around the behaviours. So these are very much around professionalism and what's expected of a working professional. So demonstration of things like leadership, collaboration and teamwork, personal and professional responsibility, amongst other things. So these would align very, very well with, I guess, the way the organisation is structured. Some of the other training courses that you might go on, the Mary Seacole programme comes to mind. But also the other training courses that you might be partaking on, either in the past or also alongside your apprenticeship. Skills and knowledge are quite easy to demonstrate from an evidence perspective. behaviours less so, and behaviours might be demonstrated through discussion, a presentation of what you've done, or some evidence that's very discussive. It sort of talks about a situation where you've had to demonstrate those behaviours. Whereas skills, you can often produce some hard evidence to demonstrate you've created a plan, for example, or you've had a communication that's gone out to a project team to tell them about something. And knowledge is often very easy to demonstrate through achievement of modules on the study course. So the behaviours are the ones which are a little bit more challenging to produce evidence for, and I'm sure we'd have lots of good conversations around what might constitute good or bad evidence for those particular competencies. So that's an overview of the course. I've rattled through that, and I'll move on now to a little bit about the University of Cumbria and how we structure the programme for you, which starts to sort of make it a bit more real in terms of timeframes and timescales. So the University of Cumbria has been around as an institution for a relatively short period of time for universities, only the last 13 years, but we can trace our roots back as far as 1822 with the Charlotte Mason College in Ambleside, Cumbria, for primarily education. The University of Cumbria, I guess like any higher education, is to excellent, accessible higher education. And we're particularly proud of our approach to experiential learning, and we build that into a lot of our health and education courses, and we try to embed it in other programs as well. We're recognised nationally and internationally for relating theory to practice, which is relevant in the workplace, and that follows through very strongly with the project management course. Our degree is aligned completely with the professional body and also with the apprenticeship standard. It's all about the applied, what you do in the workplace, rather than pure theory. We're an anchor institution within the region. We're the only university in the county of Cumbria, but also we've got strong national and international connections in some niche subject areas, particularly outdoor education, environmental management, but we also have a strong reputation nationally for nursing and also education, teacher training, those sorts of things. That's a little bit about the University of Cumbria. And then project management itself, it's a relatively new discipline as a subject in its own right, but I've been teaching project management, the courses I've been involved in for the last 23 years, as various institutions that have formed University of Cumbria. So it's not new to the people in the team, but it's new as a subject area. And I guess the emergence of project management as a discrete subject area in its own right aligns with a lot of work being done by the professional bodies, recognition by organisations that projects are a very good way to move organisations forward. And I guess it's one of the sort of more recent realisations of change, and that change is achieved through projects. So projects, transformation, organisational strategy go hand in hand. The project management courses are situated within an institute called the Institute of Business, Industry and Leadership, and it's our industry-facing institute, if you like. So we've got engineering in there. We also work alongside the police and some of the other emergency services. We've got some courses in paramedic training as well, and leadership courses. So we have a whole range of provision around those areas, which again is based around the application of theory to work-based scenarios. Our provision is growing fast. So the courses first started back in 2015. We initially had 12 students. Last year we had over 230 students. This year we'll have well over 300, probably over 350. And I think next year we'll probably have over 500 students. So the numbers are increasing rapidly. We're working with an increasing number of organisations to not only train their staff, but to move their organisations forward. And project management seems to be an apprenticeship of choice for a large cross section of industry. It's not just heavy industry. We work a lot with the nuclear sector, but we're also working with the BBC, hoping to work with yourselves more closely, and a whole range of smaller organisations as well, including some in the third sector. So that wealth of experience comes back into our teaching, because we're dealing with apprentices who are living this on a day-to-day basis. We rather than telling them everything we think we know, we do a little bit of that, but then we get back from the apprentices their work experiences, and that informs the curriculum not only for that particular cohort, but for the other cohorts that we're teaching. So there's a lot of cross-fertilization of knowledge and learning there. We're very keen to work closely with our employers, our main employers in particular. We want to deliver courses that are of value to them. And in this particular case, with the NHS, we're looking at forming closed cohort courses so that provision can be tailored to you and your particular situation, and therefore you can maximise what you get out of it. We also work very closely with the professional body, the Association for Project Management. Our courses are accredited with them. And as I said earlier, if you are successful in achieving the degree apprenticeship in project management, that makes you eligible for membership of the professional body for project management, should you wish to take that forward. We offer a whole range of courses in project management. It's not just the degree apprenticeship, but there's a lot of alignment between the modules. So the majority of the core delivery, the knowledge, if you like, is shared across the programs, and it's just how those courses are assessed or delivered, which might differ slightly between them. But we do everything from, I guess, I'll try not to talk in university speak too much, but half of a first year, a university certificate. So introductory level, first year undergraduate courses, right the way through to foundation degrees, BScs, the degree, integrated degree apprenticeship. And we're also developing a lot of master's level courses as well at the moment in project management and leadership and other disciplines that are related in those sorts of areas. And wherever possible, we try and share the modules. So we're not creating lots of bespoke things which are very unique. We're trying to pick out the key knowledge areas, run across disciplines, in this case project management, and make sure that's embedded in all of our programs. So there's progression between those routes, but also some common understanding with the students who participate in our programs. So specifically around the project management degree apprenticeship, it's normally a 4-year course. So I guess for ease of reference, I'll talk about a standard start, which would be typically a September start. The first 3 years of your education would be day release. So you'd be with us 1 day per week. At the moment, we're teaching online, and we've had to make that transition due to the coronavirus situation. Our experiences of moving to online have been favourable, both to us and to the students. So we plan to continue with that online delivery, and that will be the primary way in which this particular course will be delivered. Online for us means you've got a very structured day with a tutor, very similar to this. You'd be 4 points of contact through the day with the tutor, who would discuss the content with you, discuss the assessments, the material, and in between those scheduled sessions, you'd be doing some self-study, some group work, some work on assignments, some practical application of skills, and then you come back at regular points to discuss that and share experiences. And that would progress as you go through your standard years. So effectively, you're studying a degree full-time alongside full-time work, but the fact that the degree is very applied and the fact that your day job will involve some project management mean that is actually more manageable than it sounds. So a lot of the learning will be work-based. You'll be thinking about what you're doing. You'll be reflecting on the work experience, and we keep the assessments down to a minimum to make sure that we're not over-assessing and placing too much extra work on people when you're already busy. But we're assessing what we need to demonstrate the knowledge, skills and behaviours of the standard. So you'll progress through level 4, level 5 and level 6, which are akin to the first year, second year and third year of a typical undergraduate degree. And at the end of the third year of taught modules, that's when we've reached that gateway point, that decision to say whether or not you're able to progress through to that final endpoint assessment, where you'll do your final practice and demonstrate you're competent as a PM. There will be some tripartite reviews as we're going along. In the first year, there'll be 3 of these, at least 3. There'll be an initial one so that we can get down some baseline information. Where are you currently at in terms of your skills, knowledge development? Where are the particular strengths, weaknesses that you've got? Following that, in each subsequent year, you'll have at least 2 of those reviews. So one would typically be around about November, December. Another one might be around about March or April time, or a little bit later in the year. If need be, we can have more of those, but the standard would be 2 would be sufficient, but we can have more if need be. And then we're tracking your progress against the KSBs, the knowledge, skills and behaviour competencies. We'll start off gently with that in the first year, because at that point you could be very new to projects, and you'll be learning a lot, and trying to gather knowledge at that point, or trying to gather evidence at that point, might be a bit pointless. We'll do a little bit of it just so that you can get into the routine of doing it. But what we'll really start doing is when we get into the second year and third year is where you'll start gathering pieces of evidence which are quite substantive, and you might be able to tick off several of the competencies from them. So the bits of evidence, ideally, are large and can be used multiple times, rather than having lots of small bits of evidence that build up that picture, if that makes sense. You can ask more questions on that later if need be. Employers need to be heavily involved in apprenticeships. The main reason is that you will need to be exposed to a range of situations within the workplace to be able to demonstrate certainly the skills and some of the knowledge acquisition that you need. And that's where that involvement with the work-based supervisor is really important, that if there's something particular around governance of projects and decision making that you need to gather, then you'll need to be exposed to that either directly or indirectly through some sort of shadowing, secondment, temporary placement, to be able to get that experience. So if you don't have the involvement of line managers, it can be quite tricky sometimes to get the evidence. So in terms of the study, these are a high-level overview of the modules that we do. And again, if anybody's interested, we can ask a bit more questions later, or we've got plenty of time to ask these questions further down the line. But we tend to break our courses down into what we call 20 credit modules. And if you think of a typical year of undergraduate studies, 6 of those, so 120 credits per year. So in our first year, we start off with the foundations module. We teach that at the beginning. And the idea with that one is we get the standard terminology for project management in place, so that everybody knows what we mean by the terms we're going to use. So what we mean by projects, programs, portfolios, what we mean by a schedule or a program, and that then the rest of the modules, we can use that language and everybody knows what we're talking about. So there's a lot of contextualization in that module. What does this mean for us in our particular organization? So that you can start to understand how projects are then implemented within your own world, and what that translates across to in your own understanding. We then typically move on to a module which covers the business environment. So you understand why projects are done by businesses, what's the aim of doing them, and by business I mean organisations. So in your particular case, it's around what might the NHS expect to get out of their improvement programmes. What would a benefit look like? In some organisations, it might be about cost. In others, it might be about profit. It might be about interventions. There'll be a whole range of different measures that we're looking for. So it's important that we understand what your particular organisation is aiming for with projects, so that we can then move on to the decisions of working out what might be a better project to do than something else. What offers the most value, if you like, to a particular organisation. Other modules, we then get on to project planning and control, which is, I guess it's quite technical in areas, and we talk about some techniques of doing that. We then move on to projects in a commercial environment, which is largely about contracts and procurement and supply, so that you understand the bigger picture within organisations about if you're delivering some sort of new development, new implementation of a system or a building or piece of equipment, then that might fit within a wider procurement strategy that's in place. So that might place some constraints on how you go about delivering that project, for example. And as a project manager, you might not be able to influence that, but you will at least understand why those things are in place. So that helps you understand some of the challenges that projects face in with larger organisations. We then have a module on professional development, which is your first real attempt at portfolio building. And there's a lot of overlap in that module with the Mary Seacole Leadership Development Programme, which I'm aware of within the NHS. So it may be, if people are doing that programme or have done that programme, then there are large chunks of that module which we wouldn't need to repeat. There's additional work in that module which we think is really important around IT skills development. So we try to make our project managers very IT literate, very proficient at collecting, managing, manipulating data, so that you can achieve things more quickly than you might have done in the past. Final module at level 4 is something around stakeholder management, which sort of pulls all these subject areas together and reinforces the importance of communications within your team, but also within organisations, so internal, external stakeholders, and being able to identify potential conflicts and develop appropriate negotiation strategies for dealing with those. Next level, so that's the first year. So in a time sequence, if we started in September, this then takes us through to round about the following June. You then have a break from education over the summer. You'll still be in work, obviously. You're still gathering evidence. Come back in September and we start the second. So at that point, we then have, or we initiate a year-long module, and that's professional development 2. And that's the one where we really start looking at your portfolio in earnest. So you've now got at least a year's experience behind you, maybe more if you've been in a project role in the organisation for longer, and you're starting to build that evidence against the competencies. By the end of that module, we might not have all of the competencies mapped out, but you will have done a complete gap analysis and you'll know which bits you've got left to do in the following year, if you like. Module on project performance management. A lot of the work of a project manager is about informing people above them, program managers, line managers, of progress, issues, challenges on projects. So that's really about understanding how you can communicate that effectively. And if we're trying to manage a project in terms of its achievement, it can be often quite challenging because we've never done it before. And therefore, we're never quite sure sometimes how far along a project we are. So how can we understand what good performance might look like and where we might expect to be at a certain point in time, and how we can then communicate that to decision makers further up the organisation. Another module we'll then do is project management professionalism. And what we're looking at there is, again, it's those behaviours. So what might it mean to be a professional? And again, strong alignment there with other elements within your organisation, I'm sure. Further module on project management methodologies. There are many ways to do projects, and different sectors, different organisations will have their own particular ways of doing them. And I'm sure you'll have your own ways within the NHS as well. So there's an opportunity in there to study and learn from existing models, but also to reflect on and discuss your own current approach. And one of the assessments in that particular module might give you the opportunity to review the way that you go about doing projects within your own part of the organisation, to see if there are any opportunities to learn from practice elsewhere. And finally, something around project quality. So we talk about quality generally, but then apply it specifically to projects. And I guess the different thing with projects is they might only be done once, and it might be a unique and quite novel thing we're doing. So therefore, there's a lot to learn, a lot of mistakes to make. So how can we maximise our chances of having a quality product the first time through? In a more rehearsed environment, like a business, what we call business as usual, then things are understood well, so that you can spot immediately when something deviates from tolerance. In project forward. So that's level 5 study, and that would take us through to, if you like, the sort of following June, July from a time perspective. Again, a little bit of a break over the summer, an opportunity to then continue gathering some of that evidence that you might need before we started the final year of modules. So we start to think at this point that we've done a lot about projects themselves. We understand what they are, how they fit within an organisation, to understand some of the bigger picture things. So where do those projects then fit within programs and portfolios? So that's obviously Jo's area. That aligns completely with her job title and role. So you understand your place, if you like, in the bigger picture within the organisation, and how you can contribute to that. Projects sort of filter outputs up through the organisation, but strategy needs to come down as well, so that organisations can't do everything they want to do. I'm sure you're more than aware of that within the NHS. So you have to be selective about what you do to maximise the value and the impact that you get from every pound that is spent. So that helps you understand some of those decision-making processes that take place. We look at leadership in the context of projects. So we look at leadership quite generally. But also then look at particular project environments and think what approaches to leadership might be appropriate for different types of projects. So there are many different ways to lead. So we're looking at that one in the context within your own organisation, but also within the context of projects. Another high-level module around governance change, which in this context really is about transformation within organisations, and also risk management. Again, those bigger picture decisions around choosing what we do, how we do it, why we do things a certain way, how we can ensure that we are doing things wisely in an accountable way, along with all of the organisational constraints that we've got to work within, which within the NHS, there will be many. And a final module, again, on management and control of projects. So taking this idea of understanding performance to the next level of sort of critical analysis, to really not only look at current ways of measuring performance, but also thinking about future ways. There's always more we can do on understanding progress and performance. So what are the standard techniques and the emerging techniques for understanding work around projects and the impact of them? At that point, you would have completed all of the taught element. That's where we would progress through the gateway. And then the final hurdle, if you like, the final chunk of delivery is the endpoint assessment project, which you would do in your 4th year. So you'd start that sort of 12-month window from around about the June or July, and that would run through to the following summer. All being well, you'll pass that, and then you'd graduate the following summer. So a journey of round about 4 years between start and endpoint. Bit of an overview of how we sort of think about our modules. There's lots of different underpinning themes, if you like, that run through the course. So these would be, foundational knowledge, modules around people and those interactions, which are at the core of an awful lot of project management. Things around process, about how we do things and how we might do things in certain sectors. There's a stream around controls, so how we can manage to budgets and deadlines, milestones, so that we know where we should be and whether or not we're on target. And then there's some elements around practice and proficiency at the top of the chart. So just try to map the projects there at level 4, the modules, sorry, not the projects, at level 4, level 5, and level 6. So you can see how the modules sort of flow from one to the next and how the themes follow through from those modules. So you can sort of pick up, for example, that there's a leadership theme that runs through the course, which would go from this module here through the professional module through to project leadership. So it's professional development, project management professionalism, and ultimately project leadership. And another sort of theme in that level above there, which goes through from the controls. Apologies, I'm getting some mouse problems there on the slides. Okay, I'm aware I've probably talked for about half an hour there without a stop. Hopefully there's been some questions that have emerged along the way. So over to you guys. Any questions?
That was brilliant. Thanks, Charles. Yeah, you've stimulated some curiosity and some questions. I'm going to take the one that came in first, if that's okay. It's posed by D at NHS Bath and North East Somerset, Swindon and Wiltshire CCG. So she asks, can individuals transfer current study ACAS points to the programme to participate and complete this apprenticeship, i.e. transfer their study?
It's possible. What we have to do is ensure with any transfer of study that the learning outcomes map across from one module to another. So wherever that is an option, what we need to do is sit down, have a look through what you've done, have a look at the detail of modules, maybe collect a little bit more evidence about the learning and the assessment, and then we can hopefully map it across. So it would depend very much on the nature of what's been studied.
So case by case basis, and that would
Definitely,
be that assessment would be done at the time of interest. Then, Charles, would it?
It can be done in a couple of places, Mike.
Yeah.
I mean, if we know about it in advance, then we can do it as part of the application process. It's occasionally something that comes to light once a student starts and they realise, I've done something like this before. And then we can have the conversation later. So it can be done either before or after. It doesn't really matter.
Is it worth mentioning at this point potentially that the transition from a level 4 to a level 6?
Can be.
Yeah.
So very briefly there, what Mike's alluding to is that there is already a level 4 higher apprenticeship, which is titled Associate Project Manager. That's been around for a little bit longer than the degree. So it may be that there's people already out there that have got that level 4 achieved. And if that's the case, then what we do is we have mapped that against our first year, and we're satisfied that the learning outcomes are addressed. And therefore, if anybody has got that level 4 higher apprenticeship, then they could start on our second year, our level 5 effectively, and pick up the course from that point. So it would reduce it from a 4-year program to a 3-year program effectively.
That might fit in with Katrina's question that she just
Yeah.
asked, which is this course suitable for people who are already project managers with 10 years experience and prior qualification in Prince 2, MSP or Agile?
Yeah, it can be. What we do, so these are, as I mentioned right at the beginning, it's funded through the Levy Fund, which is managed by the Skills Funding Agency. And as part of the application process in the eligibility for funding, we would have to do an initial skills assessment. So we have a series of statements which are based around the competencies. And if following an interview discussion, we deem you fully competent already, then the Skills Funding Agency wouldn't want to fund further study in that particular area. But if we can recognise gaps in that in your current skills, then we can basically build a case of where you would most appropriately join the course. We wouldn't want somebody to join straight in at the final year at level 6. That would be a bit too demanding, jumping straight into level 6 and then having to generate all the evidence. So the ideal would be that you would probably join in again round about that level 5, maybe midway through level 5. We'd find a way to sort of tick off the various different competencies as need be. But again, on a case by case.
Just on that, there is a question from Andrew. I've completed the PFQ, so the Project Fundamentals qualification with APM. Where can I start from?
Right at the beginning. That's the we use the PFQ as, I guess, the syllabus, if you like, for that first module. So if you wanted to, you could skip that first module, but it's an opportunity, if you've done the PFQ already, to get a really high mark in the bag and get some confidence under your belt. So we do go the PFQ syllabus in that first module, so you would learn something from doing it, but it will be a nice introduction back in. So it'd be one of those things, is it worth missing the first 6 weeks of the course, for example, and not being part of that initial cohort for the sake of that PFQ? I would argue not. But if you already have the PMQ, which is a bit more demanding, then that's a different conversation. There might be some more things that we could appropriately miss out of that first year.
Great, thanks, Charles.
We had a couple of. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, go on, Joe. I was just going to ask. There was one up at the top just after the D's question about what's the sort of commitment you would sort of look at having someone do to ensure that they're covering what they need to, because I think some of the questions we've had previously when we've talked about this is how do people balance a busy job, busy life, and some have family, some don't, and what's the commitment realistically to do that?
It's a simple question, but it's a really complicated answer. It will depend. Everybody's different in terms of their ability, how quick they learn, prior knowledge and experience, what they want to achieve and get out of this. So it's one of those things that, some people will spend a lot of time, and we might be talking an extra day, an extra 2 days per week doing the study. Other students will do a minimal amount. I think from a point of view of difficulty, level 4 is relatively straightforward, and you can get through the level 4 modules with the single day of study that we do. We do a lot of quite short practical assessments in those modules, so it minimises the amount of extra work you've got to do on writing assignments. As we get into the second and the third year, there's a lot more that's written assessment, and therefore you have to do that in your own time. And it would then depend very much around how much you want to, in terms of your own grades, how long it takes you to get your head around the concepts and the ideas, how far you want to take it. Some people aren't happy with just having enough understanding. They like to go that bit further. So it's one of those things. It could be anywhere from an extra 3 or 4 hours a week through to an extra 10 or 15 hours a week by the time you get to the level 6 study with high ambitions.
Great, thanks, Charles.
Thank you. There's been a couple of questions in relation to what happens, because it's quite a long course, if you change job employer, but also there's also a question in there around someone who's on a fixed term contract.
Okay. Again, great question. Could be quite complicated. We've designed our course so we'll deal with the you change jobs situation, or you want to drop out of the apprenticeship because you might have changed roles, but you'd like to finish the course. So there's a degree that almost entirely maps onto the degree apprenticeship. Slight difference at level 5. Instead of that portfolio building module, there's something called an applied project, which is a simulated project. And at level 6, instead of the endpoint assessment, we have a dissertation. So at any point along the program, right up until even that endpoint assessment, if somebody decides that the apprenticeship isn't working for them, they can't get the evidence that they want, the organisation is not supporting them, but they'd like to drop off and finish onto the degree program, then they can do that. And there's you can do that at any stage. The second consideration might be you, for whatever reason, you change roles or you decide project management's not for you, and you've got a certain way through the program. So at the end of level 4, there's something called an exit award. So at that point, you would get a university certificate of higher education in project management. If you get to the end of level 5 and you drop out, so the end of the second year and you leave or whatever, you would get a diploma of higher education, a DipHE, in project management. If you get right the way through to that endpoint assessment, but you haven't quite got all the evidence there, you've passed all of the educational components, but the work-based stuff just hasn't worked for you and you haven't got the evidence, or you don't have a really good experience in that final project, and for whatever reason you've failed that endpoint assessment, you would come out with what we call an ordinary degree in project management. So there's a whole sequence of exit points that you would come off the course. If you come off midway through a year and you don't achieve each of those milestones, if you like, then you get a full credit of a certificate that says what you've achieved, which modules you have successfully passed, and that can then be transferred into other programs, for example, if need be.
That's great. Thank you for that. We've got a question from Alison Smith, which is, would it be attainable for individuals who've not completed recent academic study but have project management in their job? Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, we start at level 4 and part of our orientation induction activities are introducing you to academia, because we are aware of sometimes it could be 5, 10, 15 or more years since somebody actually did anything academic in nature. So we do a lot of work, especially in that first year in that level 4, around preparing people to write professionally, to be able to use sources to defend their arguments, so that you're aware of the academic aspect. So we're building that up alongside. We don't expect students to hit the ground running on that one. If you've got some recent academic experience, then you've got a head start, which is great. But we don't expect that, and we will provide everything you need from that starting point.
Okay, great, thank you. Andrew had asked about funding, but that's the employer who funds it through the levy contributions, isn't it?
Yes, it is with this, yeah.
Okay, Mike, did you spot any more questions? Or if we've not picked up a question, can you raise your hand on the thing, and we'll come to you to answer it. Any last questions? We've got a few minutes left if you wanted to ask anything more of Charles.
There was one I was just responding to Deborah McIntosh, and that was just relating to if you're on a substantive or seconded role and what that means for going on something like this. And at the moment, we haven't got the clarity we'd like from HR and OD as yet, so we're just going to work through those questions. And that was something that was picked up on the level 4 project data apprenticeship as well. So we're gonna look into those things and find out what that means, Deborah. So we'll come back to you.
Peter's just asked, what is the minimum working hours requirement?
It is stated on the skills funding. So every year the SFA release new funding guidelines. It'll be in there. I won't quote it because I could be wrong. I've got a feeling it's high 20s to around about 30 hours that somebody's got to be in post in a permanent job to qualify for the funding. But check with the skills funding agency will be my guidance there.
will follow that up and share that information with everybody that's been on the call, and we'll link it in with the recording as well, so people know that. There's been a question, when would the next start date be on the course? It's a good one, because we do have to go through the procurement process first, and one of the things that we had to do was establish appetite for these programs in order so that there's sufficient numbers to run them and to understand how many cohorts we would want to run and how often. We've talked about potentially having a cohort in either end of March or start of April, and then one in September, so that there's a 6-month between them in terms of them being a potential rolling program. And that is that's what we would like to sort of aim for. And one of the things that it's kind of important to reflect on, it comes back to the funding piece, is that as Charles mentioned, because people may move role, they may change, they may move out of a job that is funded by a particular organisation. The cost of the programme is charged on a month-by-month basis. So we couldn't use, say, underspend from one year and get a whole chunk of people paid for and out of the way for the next year. It's charged each month, so we need to make sure that the funding and the numbers of apprenticeship roles are funded for each kind of subsequent year through the individual employer. Charles, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No,
in terms of timescales,
I've probably spoken a lot on that one. Yeah, it would just be nice to get a sense of further interest, really, and people that are interested in taking it forward. Would just useful to know, get a sense of that, really. I mean, it's great to see 35 people.
Yeah, it is. We had 40 at one point. I think just there was something a question, or sort of something from Mavis earlier around age, but can you just give us a sort of a flavour for the types of people doing the course at the moment, Charles? Is it
whole range? Yeah, I mean, some organisations recruit people at the age of sort of 18, 19, 20, and they're going to be their project managers of the future. So organisations like BAE Systems, Sellafield, Rolls-Royce tend to recruit around that sort of area as an alternative for students going off to university. But other employers, particularly the smaller employers, we're getting people with a whole range of experience and ages coming on the programs. I wouldn't like to guess what our current oldest student is, but certainly be in the 50s. So that it's there's no barrier to it other than your own confidence, I guess. We are used to dealing with people who haven't been in education for a while, and we would support you in that, not just through the team, but the university's got a wealth of experience in doing that as well. So there's a whole team that can support people into this if it's a while since you did anything formal from an education perspective.
Oh, no, that's good to know. Thanks, Charles.
There's a question around whether the cohorts will be managed through NHS Project Futures or individually by employer organisations. So it's a little bit of both. So we're working with the NHS Leadership Academy to procure the programmes, so go through that process so that they are available for every NHS organisation and project managers across the whole landscape to apply for. In terms of the funding, that comes from the individual organisation, and there is a form basically to fill in which says that you want to go on that programme, and it needs to be signed off by your line manager and organisation to say they support it financially and also with the time for you to go on that. We'll be looking at pulling together the cohorts because, again, people will be all over the country. So what we will be looking to do is to help to facilitate the programme. We will work with the employers and make sure the messages are out there and help with the sort of the process. But also we want to bring the cohorts together as part of the community to help them both work together and share their learning, but also then help share that back across the community. So it's going to be a relationship that we will be working with people across the whole sector. So there's a couple more questions, I think, in there. Peter asked a question. One day at the university mentioned how often is it required and is it necessary?
At the moment, we're fully managing to deliver completely online, and certainly the core knowledge that we're doing in the assessments and everything like that can be done in that way. what you might lose out on if you don't have any physical visits to university is that wider university experience. But again, depending upon where you are in your career, you might not want that. A future plan that we want to implement, given that we're doing more online, is hopefully when the situation returns to some sort of normality in the future, we will continue with online education, but bring our students together, probably over the summer at one of our main campuses, maybe Lancaster, and have like a conference with our students from a range of different sectors to share that knowledge and experience across PM. So that's a future aim that will give you some of that face-to-face contact. We have campuses across the country. We've got campuses in Carlisle, Lancaster, Ambleside, but also in London, believe it or not. So there are places where you can go to experience a physical University of Cumbria campus, but we're very geared up for online as well. So we've got all of our library facilities are all online. So, you know, it's one of those you may or may not benefit from a physical visit anyway.
So very last 2 minutes. So next steps, we'll be following up with those that are interested in applying, and we'll be completing the procurement process to get the programme up and running and getting that first cohort registered. So what would be really interesting is for those of you on the call, can you stick your hand up metaphorically in the thing if you're interested in potentially taking this forward and you would like to explore it in next steps in terms of the process. There's a very handy count thing at the top, which means we don't have to count all the hands. I learned that the hard way the first time. So is that everybody's hand up that's interested? If you're interested for somebody else or for your team as well, potentially in order sharing that within your organisation, if it's not for you specifically, put that up as well so that we know that there's likely to be that continuing engagement. Okay, so that's great. So we've got 1920. Right, that's lovely. Thank you. We will follow up with everybody that was on the call. We'll also share the link to the recording. We'll share the answers to the questions and we'll post them up in the YouTube channel, which was on the link. So if you look at the messages and link, you'll see the link to the YouTube channel and you'll see the details there. Thank you ever so much for joining. That's been fantastic. Thank you very much, Charles. That was really good.
Charles.
You're welcome.
And lots of really great questions from everybody. Thank you very much, and we look forward to catching up with you all again very soon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.